The Consulting Success podcast is powered by the Clarity Coaching Program. If you'd like to work directly with the Consulting Success team and receive personal coaching and support to optimize and grow your consulting business, marketing, and revenue, visit consultingsuccess.com to find out more and apply.
Welcome to the Consulting Success Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Zipursky. In this podcast, we'll dive deep into the world of elite consultants, where you'll learn the strategies, tactics, and mindset to grow a highly profitable and successful consulting business.
So the way to think about this is you start off with your base rate, right? And your base rate here is really what's kind of acceptable to you. This might be based on the number of hours that you're going to be involved in a project, your overall involvement. This is the base, right? This is your starting point. You know that you want the project to be at least at this level in order for it to be profitable for you, to feel good about the compensation that you're receiving. And this is where a lot of people actually just settle. They stay at the base rate all the time. But if you're staying at the base, then you're missing out on a great deal of upside, of opportunity, of potential, of value and compensation that you can capture when you move up towards creating fees based on value and ROI, right? Return on investment. So how do you do that, right? What are the different factors? Well, you start off in thinking about, okay, time, right? This is your involvement. This is kind of at the base level. But as you move up towards value, you want to start considering the two different forms of value. You have tangible and you have intangible. So if we talk about tangible, really what we're referring to here are things like sales, revenue, right? So these are things that are very apparent, easy to track based on your involvement with the client. And so let's just take an example that you are going in, you're helping them to bring in more funds for the nonprofit that they run. Well, that would be an increase in fundraising. Very easy for you to track, right? That's a tangible improvement and increase in value. It might also be that you are lowering the turnover rate, meaning the number of employees, right? They're not leaving the organization as quickly as they were before because you have a better culture or better practices, whatever it might be, right? That you've helped to instill or to install into that organization. Now, intangible is a little bit different, right? Intangible can be things like lower stress, right? So the intangible areas of value are not always as apparent. They're not always as clear. And I've had a lot of conversations with consultants over the years who go, well, a lot of the work that I do is not tangible. I can't track it, right? It's about maybe employee morale, or it's doing work with the leaders. And it's more about, some people say, well, strategic planning. And so it's not necessarily going to lead to an improvement in sales or in revenue or in profit or in something hard for the foreseeable future. So how do I use that in my fees? And the big thing to think about, right, is that as you keep looking at intangible value and you kind of go a level and layer deeper and deeper, you'll always find that you can actually bring it back to something that is tangible. I think that's really important that you kind of consider, because even though you might think at first glance that the area of consulting that you are working in is only intangible, I would challenge you that if you keep working back and asking yourself, okay, well, if we do these things, and what's the impact, what's the benefit, what's the outcome that the buyer actually cares about, how does it make a difference for them, you'll actually find that if you keep asking that question, you'll find that it takes you back to tangible. But here, I put in red here a few things that do influence and that you want to kind of take note of as you think about your fees in relation to value and return on investment, and how you can move off of the base rate up to a much higher, we'll say here at the value level, right? You're able to capture significantly higher fees. So the first thing that is important, a lot of people just think about like ROI in terms of return on investment, right? And you can say, well, you're going to go from a $10 million company to a $15 million company. So it's a $5 million increase, let's say in the next 24 months. That's tangible, right? You can think about that. But there's other factors, which one is COI. And COI stands for the cost of inaction, meaning that if the client doesn't make a change, if they stay where they are, what do they have to lose, right? So you want to look at that, because that influences the value. You also want to look at what are the alternatives for them, because you might say that, oh, I'm going to charge them, if I'm going to increase $5 million in the next 2 years, then I'm going to give them a very solid return on their investment. I'm not going to charge them just $1 million. But what if there are alternatives in the marketplace? There are competitors to you that are essentially providing the same thing, and their fee is significantly lower. Well, that doesn't mean that you need to lower your fee just to win that business, but it does mean that you need to think about what additional value are you bringing to the table? What additional or higher level of confidence and lower risk are you bringing to the table that warrants your premium fee? So always think about alternatives. You also want to think about how you communicate and develop your authority and your expertise. Because one of the things that contributes to value is how you are perceived in the marketplace, right? Value is a perception of value. If it's not necessarily tangible, right? How do you actually increase your value before you even have a conversation with a buyer? Well, you do that through your authority and your expertise. Most often that is through content or the development of intellectual property, but it's also about the conversation that you have with the buyer. If you do a great job of putting out content that communicates your expertise, your authority, success that you've had with other clients and things of that nature, or you write books or articles or podcasts, right? All this kinds of stuff that your ideal client sees and goes, wow, this person clearly is an expert. They understand this industry or this area better than others. They are a leader in their area. Well, that perception of value influences what they feel they will pay you, right? That they're willing to invest. Whereas if you take a consultant that has no intellectual property developed, no content out there, they're not really visible, well, then they are seen more as a commodity compared to a consultant that is always creating intellectual property, putting out content. And so these two things here, these will really influence your value and your fees. But don't forget about the cost of inaction, or also looking at how do you fit into the other options that your ideal clients and those buyers have in the marketplace. These will also influence your value. And then the other one that I just want to point you to here that I said is the conversation, right? Because this is a big opportunity for you to communicate value. The way that you ask questions, the things that you point out to your ideal client in that conversation before they even see your fees will influence in their mind and the perception they have of you. If you ask great questions, they will see you as a greater authority. If you can demonstrate success or kind of move the conversation to, hey, here's, that's interesting because we did something similar with another client. They had this challenge. We did these things. They got this result. That increases their perception of value in you because they know that you've done it before. It lowers the risk in their mind. So back to the question of how do you come up with, how do you decide on what your fee should be on the basis of value and ROI? Well, you first of all get clear about what your base is. So as an example, let's say that your base here, we'll just put it in, was kind of, you wanted it to be $10,000. Okay. Well, that's based on your involvement, your time that you're bringing to the project. You know that for the project that you've discussed with the buyer, that this would be the minimum that you would feel good about. Anything lower than that, you would feel you're not being compensated. So that's very simple, right? That's kind of the science behind it. That's what you need. But now all of these other aspects around the value, maybe let's go back to our example that you're going to help this client to increase their sales by $5 million over the next 2 years. Well, $10,000 for helping a company add $5 million would be ridiculous, right? So even though your actual hard cost of time in that project might only be $10,000, or maybe that's too low, right? Maybe let's just say, maybe you actually think it should be like something like $50,000, but you're helping them to increase or to grow by 5 million, or you're helping them to reduce their stress, or you're helping them to perform at a higher level, whatever it may be. So you think about all these other factors, right? The tangible, the intangible. You think about the cost of inaction. What if they don't make a change? What happens to their market share? What happens to their place in comparison to the competition? What happens to their shareholders and investors and how people see them? All these different factors. You look at how the level of authority and expertise that you bring as compared to others in the marketplace. And what that does is it now influences the premium, right? The addition of value. So instead of it being a $50,000 engagement, right? You look at, well, I'm bringing all this additional value. Maybe that actually warrants a $150,000 fee or a $250,000 fee. And I'll give you a quick example. I was speaking to a client several years ago who was going back to share a proposal with a client that they had actually worked with previously. So it was a second project. They felt really good about it. And she said, yeah, my fee for this is going to be $65,000. That was her base. But we talked about the impact that it was going to have on her client, on that organization, both the tangible, the intangible, the cost of inaction, her expertise and authority, and her knowledge of that business that she was already bringing to the table. And she ended up, as a result of that conversation and seeing the increase in value that she could provide to them, to that organization, she went in at around $300,000 and won that project. So she almost left a significant amount of money on the table, right? Almost $250,000 on the table if she would have just thought about the base rate. So it's good to know what your base is, kind of what your starting point is in terms of time and involvement in the project. But the real upside for you is to get clear on the value that you are bringing to the client, to the project, right? The tangible, the intangible, the cost of inaction, what are the alternatives? And then all this other value that you are providing in content even before that conversation, as well as during the conversation. So I'd encourage you to think through these other aspects and elements before you go talk to clients, or before you put a fee and proposal in front of them, because this can help you to capture significantly more value, more compensation, more income, more success as you build your consulting business.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Consulting Success Podcast. For more episodes and to subscribe, rate, and leave a review, head on over to iTunes. And if you'd like to develop consistent lead flow and a highly profitable consulting business, learn more about our coaching programs at consultingsuccess.com.